Hello, everybody. Welcome to Haiku Talk. I'm your host, Ben Ga, your friendly neighborhood haiku poet. And today is episode 100. And today I'm going to feature one of my own poems. It comes from the latest issue of Acorn. That would be issue 52. And it has a first line of, "As if it never happened." So with that said, you know what time it is. Time to sit back, relax, grab yourself a tasty beverage, and let's Senryu. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It's good to be with you again for the episode 100 of Haiku Talk. Yes, 100. It's hard to believe that we've done 100 of these. And in that time, we've had 100 episodes of not one single poet has been repeated, which is pretty awesome. I don't know if that will stay true in the next 100, but at least the first 100 is all episodes, 100 different poets. And it's been quite a ride. I mean, when I look back at that very first episode and how disheveled and tired I was, it's come a long way. This channel has come a long way. Even though that first episode also is my most rewatched episode. So thank you all for tuning in and sticking through that first trial run. The thing about starting stuff like this is that if you don't do it and just do it, and wait for everything to be perfect and work out all the kinks and bells and whistles, you'll never do it. You'll never get anywhere. I just had this idea to do this channel one day, and I sat down with a poem by Brian Rickert, and I just went for it. You know, just used the camera right on my laptop. Didn't know how it was going to go, how I was going to put it together, but just to see how it would go. And I really liked the way that I talked about the poem and pieced it together. And you know, as I think I said in that first episode, you know, all the technical stuff will grow and get a little better along the way. And that certainly has been the case. But the thing about these things is that if you don't know how to talk about something, if you don't have good content and you don't have something that you're passionate about that you want to share with people, no matter how technically brilliant you try to piece things together, it's going to be lacking. And hopefully my passion for this form forms of haiku and senryu have come across. And I do thank you all for watching these episodes of this past couple years of me putting together this channel. And it's really weird to be here. I know I've had people asking me, what are you going to do for the 100th episode? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? And I wasn't quite sure. But over the years, I've had people suggest that or ask me why I haven't done any of my own poems. And I never had a really good answer other than to say that it's hard to talk about your own poems without narrowing down or focusing the readership down one way of looking at a poem. When it's not mine, I feel like I can come at the poem with a fresh mind, fresh eyes, and talk about how it engages me and showing how it works. And that puts me on the same area, the same plane as the person watching the video. They also aren't the poets that have written the poem, although I am very thankful for the poets that I've featured that have watched it and have liked these things. It's so cool to hear back from you. But if I'm talking about a poem that's not mine and readers are watching this and it's not theirs, then we kind of have the shared conversation where we're talking about something together and it becomes kind of a cool thing. But I am a poet, I'm a haiku poet, and I do think that it would be fun to do one of my own pieces. And then it's the pressure, which one? Well, that's a tough question. I have a couple in the latest issue of Blithe Spirit, which I haven't done the latest issue of Blithe Spirit yet. And then the new issue of Acorn is coming in the mailbox. And my piece in there has seemed to touched people in a way by me just posting it on Facebook and Instagram and stuff like that people have commented on it. I actually did a reading this past week, and Allison Whipple, who I read with in the Q&A section, asked me to recite that poem because it just struck her as a good example of a senryu and is just a really good piece. And so I thought, well, I love Acorn. It's one of the first journals that I really reached out to and started to submit to back in the day, 2009, when I first went all in on this forum. It was edited by Carolyn Hall back then, who's one of my haiku superstars that I look up to. And so it's kind of fun for me to use that to be featured in this journal and to feature my poem from it. Now, let's get to the poem, and then we'll start to break it down, talk about how it works and what it's doing. So the poem goes like this. As if it never happened, and yet this old wedding ring. As if it never happened, and yet this old wedding ring. Yep, that's the poem. And I am proud of this one. It does carry a lot of weight with me in a lot of different ways. And this is one of these poems that if you know me and know my life story, you know that you might pull some poet life story into how you read the poem. And can be good and bad. I mean, haiku in Senryu are supposed to be poems that you read, that you find yourself in. But, I was a person that went through a divorce. And if you have followed my work outside of the channel, you know that for many, many years, you saw poems under my name of Ben Moeller-Ga, including my Touchstone Award-winning book, Wishbones. And then suddenly it just went to Ben Ga. And hopefully you've all recognized that's the same person. That is something that I debated with and had to think through post-divorce, because when I was married before, my ex and I, when we got married, decided to joint hyphenate our last names. We both did that together. She was the Moeller and I'm the Ga. And then when we parted ways, I went back to my name beforehand. But all of my haiku up until that point in Senryu had been published under that other name. So that's a little backstory for me, and that weight might carry through to the poem if you're reading it, and if you, like I said, if you've been following me for a while through the journals and so forth. Those of you that are new to the channel, that might be backstory for you. Doesn't really, hopefully, affect the way you come to the poem, but it is something I felt like I needed to put out there because I do know many people that do watch the channel that have seen me and seen my work over the years. All of that aside, what's going on with this poem? Now, the format doesn't quite follow the fragment and phrase per se that we normally come across, and it doesn't really follow like a middle pivot in the sense that the middle line can speak to the first line or the third line. But it is two images that are pieced together by that middle line, and that if read sequentially, the whole thing gains weight, and the whole moment becomes clear, and hopefully it resonates with folks. So that first line is, as if it never happened. As if it never happened. Now it's a statement of sorts, but it's also something that implies that whatever you're experiencing at the moment, there's a change. Something is different about what you're experiencing, as if it never happened. Now, we don't know what it is, but whatever it is, experiencing it now is as if it never happened. So it's a curious line. It's also, it rolls off the tongue. It's easy to read. It's an easy to say line. It's easy to understand line. And it does sort of point into the direction that this is Senryu, and this is totally Senryu. It's a 100% human nature poem, not a nature poem. But we don't know what's happening yet. But it's intriguing because it's got that question of what is it that has happened that's not quite the same anymore. So then we go to line 2, and line 2 is simply, and yet. And yet. And now that's an old trick I picked up from Isa. Isa has used that phrase, or at least the translators have used that phrase, and yet, a dewdrop world, or so on and so forth. And it's an old little phrase that I've kept in my toolbox for many, many years and shows up in my work here and there. And so it felt appropriate to use here because as if it never happened is the opener. And yet, something is coming. And it leads you to that third line to figure out what that is. So there's tension that's created here. There's it's the tension that we know that line 1 and line 3 are gonna vibrate together, but we don't know exactly why yet. And yet preps us for it. And you get to line 3, and it's this old wedding ring. This old wedding ring. And suddenly, we know what it is, or we have more of an idea of what it might be referring to, and how in the moment, you're thinking about that it, and it's as if it never happened. But there's that artifact that proves that it did, that's still with you, that you haven't let go of, that you hold on to, don't know what to do with. And that's the thing that reminds you that it did. Now, there's a couple different ways to read this. And I say that because this poem had a couple different drafts, couple different directions. It started out more specifically around my dad's wedding ring after my mom died and reflecting on that. And it kind of morphed into something a little bit less specific, which that could still be a fine poem. And my air conditioner's coming on. Sorry for the buzz in the background. And the decision to whittle that back and edit that back to make it more generic in a sense, I felt opened the piece up to give it the ability to mean more things to more people. And in doing so, the poem meant more to me at the same time, because I could think about it in its beginnings of how you have this remnant of a marriage, of where now somebody has passed away, and you're left with this wedding ring to remind you every day that that did happen, even though you get up that day and that reality is no longer there. It's not that it didn't happen, but it's not happening anymore. It will never happen again. And so then you have this wedding ring, though, reminding you there of all the years where it did happen. Similarly, through a divorce, you have a similar type of situation where you have days as you move on through life. It's as if it never happened in many ways. And you can take this on, how you project that on who seems like it never happened to, can get very personal into your own divorce story. But at the end of the day, everybody's left with that wedding ring. So again, the poem kind of opened up and allowed it to be what it is right now by removing the sort of specifics around my mom and dad. And so that's kind of why I chose this piece specifically, because it follows a little bit of a different construction. And I wanted to give you a little bit of insight into the editorial process in making changes to go from something specific, but still could have been very universally read, to something a little bit more less specific, which widens the scope of how the poem might hit different people. Now, I will want to say another thing, that the editor, Sue Antolin, made a suggestive edit to me for the poem. Initially, the poem wasn't staggered the way it was that you see it today on the page, the way I'm showing it to you right now. It was all lined to the left. And she thought it would be more interesting visually to stagger it. And not like 99% of the time when editors give you a suggestion of how to improve your poem for publication, she was correct. And I say that because for those listening that are beginning their writing, or those that are been at it a while like me, I mean, these things happen. You'll get notes from editors, and we as poets have to decide what we want to do with those edits. Do we take them? Do we shrug them? Do we hold on to our vision and say, no, this is the way I want it, and it can only be this way? That's a decision that you have to make as an individual poet. For me, I go back to a conversation that I had with the bartender, Johnny Lucky McAteer at John D. McGurk's, who's still working there. And it was actually for another poem from Acorn, actually. I got another recommendation from Sue, and it was early on when I was writing, and it was a suggestion. I'm not going to reference the poem, but it was a suggestion that would have changed a word or made a bigger difference in the poem than just the staggered line. And at that early phase of my writing, I kept thinking, you know what? Is it still mine if, like, in this 6-7 word poem, like, somebody gives me a different word? I mean, because there's so few words, is it still mine? And Lucky and pure bartender wisdom was like, look, she likes your poem. She wants it to be good. She wants to publish it. Why wouldn't you take her suggestion? And so, swallowed a little bit of pride and was like, yes, some other people can see your work differently than you can, and can hopefully, when they give you suggestions for edits, it's to help elevate that work and make it better. Just like in this case, that visual of the staggered view is much better than the hard left view. And, take those edits, take those suggestions. It's okay. And it will make your work better, and you will learn things from it. In fact, after that suggestion, I started playing more around with the spacing of poems, something I hadn't done in a while. And it was a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun to kind of re-embrace the staggering of lines and how things fit on the page a bit more than I had been. And so be open to edits and suggestions. Don't get closed off, and don't get so tied down and so focused on your own work, and it's my work, and nobody knows my work like my work, because sometimes you can be too close to things, and people, at least in the haiku community, I've generally found this to be the case. They only want your work to be as good as it can be. There's no editing to be mean or vindictive. It's all in service of the poem. And we have to be really mindful of that, and we have to be big enough to understand that your poem, once it's kind of done, can change. It can become better. It can go through edits, and those suggestions can come from other people, and it's okay, because the poem is still yours. It's still the moment that you captured, and it's just trying to make it as good as it can possibly be. And so those are kind of the things that I wanted to say more so than toot my horn about this poem, which is nice. I do like it. I know as I move forward with doing live readings and stuff like that, it's very likely can be included into my sets, because I think it resonates with people, a lot of different people in a lot of different ways. So if this has resonated with you, please leave a comment. I do read them. It's always cool to see what people liked about something, and how it might have impacted their lives, or what kind of story it brings up in your own life. And that's one of the real joys about reading and sharing work with people in a couple different writing groups. And one of the things that one of my groups, which is I'm the only haiku poet for sure, and usually the only poet amongst fiction writers and stuff. And it's always amazing to me the stories that people, they take that poem and they just go with it, and it's like this whole scene that gets built out of where this specific poem takes them is just amazing to me. Things that I would never in a million years could have thought to come up with. But because that empty space around the poem, that white space on the page, belongs to the reader, it's cool to see how people fill that in. So I know I like to do that. That's one of the things I love on this channel, is talking about a poem and kind of filling in the white space that the poem strikes a chord in me. And so hopefully I haven't boxed you in too much to talk about my own poem. But I did want to take episode 100 just for myself. So with that said, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, Sue and Acorn, for another wonderful issue. It's a beautiful book, hand-printed issue, or print book, twice a year. You don't get a better little book than this. 1 to 2 poems per page, all haiku and senryu, only haiku and senryu. That's it. Only 1 poem per poet in each issue. So if you're doing great if you get in there. You're going to be in good company. It's not an easy journal to get into, and it's going to be a great read no matter what. And thank you for tuning in. Thank you all of my viewers that have tuned in to any number of the episodes that I've done over the years. I'm looking forward to the next 100. I'm not sure where it'll go from here. I mean, it's continuing to follow the same sort of format. And we'll see how it grows. So thank you very much. Like and subscribe if you haven't done so already, but do that if you'd like. And we'll see you again on episode 101. Cheers.